Game of Thrones has won more Emmy Awards than any other television drama in history. When the 8th and final season begins tonight on HBO, some 30 million Americans are expected to tune in. Tens of millions more will be watching live in nearly 200 countries and territories around the world. The show is based on a series of fantasy novels written by George R.R. Martin. But don't let the dragons and magic fool you. This is no kid show. The characters are complex and the storylines full of graphic violence, sex, and shocking surprises. Whether you're a fan or not, we thought you'd be interested to learn the unlikely story of how Game of Thrones began and how it turned into one of the most popular television series ever made. Game of Thrones is set in the mythical Seven Kingdoms of Westeros, whose ruler historically sits on the Iron Throne.
Kneel!
Feuding families vie for power.
I have only loved one woman.
Manipulation and murder, tools of the trade.
Your sister.
A giant wall protects the Seven Kingdoms. Winter has come, and with it, the threat of total annihilation from a seemingly unstoppable army of the dead. For you, what is the show about?
Power.
Power.
What it does to someone, how much we covet it, how it goes wrong in the wrong hands, and how different it is when you have it versus when you're coveting it.
Emilia Clarke plays Daenerys Targaryen, also known as the Mother of Dragons. She leads armies, raised dragons, and has killed a lot of people in her quest to take the Iron Throne.
Extraordinary, the sheer number of ways that people are killed.
Oh, it's incredible. We really kill them good. Daenerys is pretty old school with her burning.
But I guess the dragons also can eat people.
Indeed, but they like to char them before they... A burn is always involved in a dragon. They like their meat cooked.
It's a hard fall down these steps.
Sirio says every hurt is a lesson.
Actress Maisie Williams is Arya Stark, a teenager seeking revenge for the murder of her father.
Well, how many people have you killed?
Oh gosh, I've lost count. I think in the book she has like the highest kill count.
Williams was 12 when Game of Thrones started. She's now 22. This was her first acting job.
I didn't even want to be an actor. I wanted to be a dancer, and then my second audition was for Game of Thrones, and then it all just...
There are actors all over the world right now listening to that, screaming.
The things I do for love.
George R.R. Martin is the novelist behind this murder and magic. In 1996, he published the first in his series of books called A Song of Ice and Fire. For years, Hollywood pursued him, trying to turn his books into movies.
Their approach was inevitably to simplify. Well, okay, these books are too big, we have to cut it all down. I didn't want it simplified. So I said repeatedly the sexiest word in Hollywood, no.
That's the sexiest word in Hollywood?
But no, I don't want to do it, until David and Dan came along.
So that earlier part of the sequence was pure CG.
David and Dan are David Benioff and Dan Weiss. At the time, they were young screenwriters and novelists with no television experience, but they loved the massive scale of Martin's story.
I mean, no disrespect, you were relatively novice in this realm of television.
It's not disrespectful, it's a fact. I mean, we'd never produced anything.
You never produced anything?
What we thought we were facing was a real uphill battle of trying to explain to him why he should avoid all of these film offers and accept these two guys who've never made a television show before in their lives.
And really, he just wanted to know if we knew the books.
They knew the books cold and convinced Martin that if HBO signed on, they would make an epic cinematic television series that was true to his story.
I knew that none of the conventional networks were ever going to put this on, not without taking out all the sex and 97% of the violence and making it a kiddie show that was on at 8 o'clock. I wasn't going to let that happen.
HBO agreed, seeing it as a series about much more than just dragons and occasional magic.
If you have a story that is about the human heart in conflict with itself, about these very basic human emotions, about love and ambition and greed for power, it doesn't matter if there's a dragon in it or if it takes place on an alien planet or if it takes place in Faulkner's Mississippi.
Human stories are human stories.
Human stories are human stories. The rest is just furniture.
I drink and I know things.
That focus on the humanity of the characters is what appealed to Peter Dinklage. He plays Tyrion Lannister, an outcast member of the ruling family of Westeros. Dinklage was the first actor to sign on, despite reservations about the fantasy genre.
Dwarves in this genre always have pointy shoes and big beards, and they're relegated to either comic relief or angry warriors without romance and human characteristics, really. And that just doesn't attract me as an actor. But this guy, Tyrion Lannister, has all of that and then some.
Dinklage recommended Lena Headey to play his sister, the cunning and ruthless Cersei Lannister.
I love my brother.
By the way, she also happens to be in an incestuous relationship with her other brother, Jaime, played by Nikolai Coster-Waldau.
I mean, I read the script and then I was like, who, what? I couldn't remember half the characters. And
it is confusing.
They had weird names, all of them, then you don't remember the names.
I felt like that in the beginning too. I was like, who's gonna watch incestuous twins, dragons? Like, you know what I mean? Part of you thinks, I don't know. And then it shattered all of that.
Game of Thrones was shot in 10 different countries, at dozens of locations, many in remote and desolate places. Hundreds of crew members worked behind the scenes, and in all, more than 12,000 extras were used. Attention to detail was critical. Major battle scenes sometimes took weeks to shoot and had to be carefully choreographed. And then there are the dragons. The challenge was making them as lifelike as possible, especially when actress Emilia Clarke was supposed to be riding on them. Those scenes start as cartoon-like animation in a process called pre-visualization. Emilia Clarke was then filmed riding what in early episodes was a pretty low-tech contraption.
You're riding on a hard green shell.
Yeah, and then there was like a pole either end, and it was essentially like the dudes on the railway who,
right.
And I'm there kind of trying to like, yeah, this is badass. And everyone's like, no, look badass. You look like Harry Potter. You look like you're on a broomstick. And people are kind of looking around being like, it looks kind of weird.
It doesn't look weird, however, when edited together with special effects.
Leg. Your line. Shoulder.
Some of the most important sets they actually built from the ground up, like Castle Black, which is in a quarry outside Belfast. Actor Kit Harington, who plays one of the central characters, Jon Snow, showed us around.
But it's so interesting, I mean, that they built, you feel like this is an actual castle that's been here for hundreds of years. It's not some sort of CGI creation.
That was always with Thrones what I felt was amazing, is there was a level of detail that went beyond what the audience see.
Jon Snow was killed in Castle Black and then magically brought back to life. Other main characters weren't so lucky. Ned Stark, played by actor Sean Bean, appeared to be one of the most important characters in the beginning of the series. Then he got his head chopped off before the end of season 1.
I could not believe you killed off Ned Stark.
I have this reputation of being exceptionally bloodthirsty.
In person, you don't seem very bloodthirsty.
Star Wars kills more people than I do. I mean, right in the opening of Star Wars, they unleashed the Death Star against the planet Alderaan.
Right, but you don't know who's living on Alderaan.
Exactly.
Really.
Death should mean something. So I try to make you feel the deaths. I don't necessarily have more than any other people, but I try to make you feel them more.
After Ned Stark was killed, all the actors realized their characters could be next.
We get all the scripts in one package.
All the scripts for that season in one
Yeah,
package.
but I would always go to the end, the last page of the last script of episode 10, and go backwards.
To see if you were alive?
To see if I die. Yeah, you just wanted to go out in a heroic way, at least. You don't want to go out like off screen, like, hey, did you hear about Tyrion? What? He died. You don't want to go out that way.
The level of brutality in Game of Thrones has been controversial, particularly scenes of sexual violence and degrading treatment of women. Actors Gwendolyn Christie, Liam Cunningham, and John Bradley say there's a reason for showing it all.
Many, terrible things happen to some of the women on the show.
This story is loosely based on the War of the Roses, and I would say learn. Learn that this is what has happened in history, and this is not what needs to happen in the future.
This is a grown-up show written by grown-ups for grown-ups. Violence is disgusting.
Yeah.
We show kind of the reality of it.
The unpleasant, ugly nature of what human beings are capable of doing to other human beings.
Now that the final season is about to start, there are plans to shoot a prequel series, and HBO intends to turn Castle Black and other locations in Northern Ireland into tourist attractions. Props used in the show are still stored in a warehouse outside Belfast.
Look, a dragon.
Yeah.
It's a baby dragon. It's one of the baby dragons. Wow.
For a fan of the series, it's like visiting a shrine. There are stacks of dummy dead bodies from battles, dragon head skulls, and one of Kit Harington's most famous costumes, which weighs about 30 pounds.
Oh, hold it from that hanger.
I can barely hold this thing.
Yeah.
Wow. Remember Ned Stark, who lost his head in season 1? We found it.
We got Ned's head.
That's Ned's head?
That's Ned's head.
Oh my God.
Perhaps the most iconic characters of all in Game of Thrones are White Walkers, supernatural villains who control an army of zombie-like followers called Whites. Much of their look was created at this studio in Kent, England by Barry Gower and his team.
People say I look like a White Walker all the time. I get made fun of all the time.
Gower agreed to show us just how complex the makeup for White Walkers is.
You're comfortable enough there, yeah?
Separate pieces of silicone are painstakingly applied with glue. Then makeup and paint fills in the details. The whole process takes about 4 hours. The transformation is startling.
I keep forgetting that I'm dressed like a White Walker. You would think you would feel this, but it actually, after a while, it just kind of feels like your regular skin.
I think the temperature of the pieces warm up to your body temperature, and I think it's quite easy to forget that you're wearing something. It is like a second skin.
Despite all the meticulous attention to detail and careful planning, about halfway through the series, the Throne's executive producers, Dan Weiss and David Benioff, realized they had a problem. The TV show was catching up to the end of George R.R. Martin's books. Martin had promised 2 more novels to end the story, but he'd missed all his deadlines. He told the producers how he thought his books would end, but he didn't have all the details. So for the final seasons, Weiss and Benioff, who produced the TV series from the beginning, were on their own to decide how the game ends.
What is the feeling as a writer who's dreamed up all these characters, all of a sudden to see it taken in a direction that is not directly of your making?
Dave and Dan have done the most popular TV show in the world. I gave my baby out for adoption, and it's not my baby anymore, but the books are still my baby.
At the end of last season, Jon Snow and the Mother of Dragons united with some of the leading families in Westeros to try to stop the advancing army of the dead. But can humans put aside their differences to save themselves? Or will greed and distrust be the end of the 7 kingdoms?
I warned you. Northerners don't watch trust outsiders.
We can't tell you how it all ends, but this is how the final season begins.
Kathryn Bigelow is a film director who made a movie almost no one went to see about a subject, the Iraq War, the Hollywood studios were afraid of. And yet her movie, The Hurt Locker, is running neck and neck for all the top Oscars with the biggest grossing movie of all time. It's Megabucks Avatar against Made on a Shoestring Hurt Locker. Bigelow was a painter before she was a filmmaker and is still something of a recluse. But now she spends a lot of her time walking the red carpet. Hurt Locker has already won just about every major critics award, plus Film of the Year from the Producers Guild and Best Director Award from the Directors Guild. If she wins the big one, she'll be the first woman ever to win an Oscar for directing. Critics say that Kathryn Bigelow's Hurt Locker is the best war movie made in years, and there's an irony in the fact that it's up against James Cameron's movie.
How sweet is this, to be head-to-head with your ex-husband? Incredible that the two films were made by people who are married to each other.
You couldn't have scripted it.
Well, there's this whole thing that's going on where people love to create a headline, Battle of the Exes, War of the Roses. We were married 2 decades ago for a brief period of time, and we've been friends and collaborators since.
As we talked about this with Bigelow at a ranch where she escapes from the hoopla of Hollywood, she said she and Cameron are now such good friends, they swapped scripts and early versions of each other's movies.
When he saw Hurt Locker, did he say, you ought to do this, you ought to do that?
He said cut negative.
What is cut negative? That means perfect?
Cut negative means you're done editing.
Cut negative means it's perfect.
It was a big compliment.
And now her little movie has as many Oscar nominations as Cameron's blockbuster, 9 for both.
I was stunned, shocked, thrilled beyond belief.
Best actor.
Yes.
Best screenplay. Best picture. Best director.
Yes.
In The Hurt Locker, a riveting 2 hours filled with fear and violence, Bigelow shows how terrifying it is for a bomb squad in Iraq.
Butcher shop, 2 o'clock, dude has a phone!
Here, they're trying to stop that butcher from detonating an IED with his cell phone.
Put down the cell phone!
By using wobbly handheld cameras, Bigelow heightens the tension and the sense of immediacy. She wants the audience to feel like the 4th member of the bomb squad.
The ground just erupts out of nowhere. I mean, it's just an incredibly harrowing, dangerous, volatile environment.
She sees the film both as anti-war and as a tribute to the soldiers who sign up to do this kind of work.
These are men and women who volunteer, who are there by choice, who are walking toward what you and I and perhaps the rest of the world would run from. And they arguably have the most dangerous job in the world, yet they're there by choice.
They don't know where to look.
You don't know where to look. It's an invisible enemy, and you don't know if the man on the 3rd floor balcony is shaking out a rug or calling in a sniper strike.
But beneath all the action is a film about the psyche of soldiers under siege. Bigelow opens the movie with a quote: "The rush of battle is often a potent and lethal addiction, for war is a drug."
But it's also a sense of meaning and purpose that nothing else in your life can replicate except the battlefield.
Her main character, Sergeant Will James, can only function when his life is in danger. He's a go-it-alone cowboy who breaks the rules.
Oh, God.
And terrifies his squad members with reckless behavior.
What's he doing?
I don't know. I'm gonna die. I wanna die comfortable.
He's fearless as he looks for bombs. And when he defuses one, he then has to deal with the usual secondaries.
Secondary.
Take cover, get in the wall, get in the wall!
It never stops in this movie. Really, it is one intense moment right after the next.
Right.
Without let up.
Without let up.
She likes to watch, and she captures. She's a painter.
Jeremy Renner plays Sergeant James. I don't know anybody who has seen this movie who says, I can't believe a woman directed this movie. The violence, the macho-ness.
What does having a set of ovaries have to do with directing a film? It's through her eyes that she sees, not through her mammaries or anything else that defines her as a woman, right?
This muscular, somewhat violent world that she's attracted to. Do you understand what it is she's drawn to there?
I think the idea of war and conflict fascinates her. And so it's something that's out there in the world that she's trying to understand. But I think she also takes pride in the fact that she can outgun the guys. That just in pure technique, just pure game. She's got more game than most of the male directors out there.
Bigelow is 58, and The Hurt Locker is her 8th movie. And if she has a signature, it's exactly that, a concentration on tough guys like Harrison Ford and Liam Neeson in K-19, The Widowmaker, and on daredevils like Keanu Reeves and Patrick Swayze in Point Break, about an FBI agent who goes after a ring of bank robbers.
I'm drawn to provocative characters that find themselves in extreme situations, and I think I'm drawn to that consistently.
She's been drawn to it ever since the early 70s, when she was in New York studying painting, and one night went to the movies with some friends. The film was Sam Peckinpah's The Wild Bunch, a Western known as much for its body count as its art.
It could be very
visceral.
violent, it could be very bloody. It could...
Very, very visceral, very, and you were enraptured with this material.
Enraptured because she realized that unlike painting, film could make you physically feel what the characters in the film were feeling. One of her professors described it as
scopophilia.
Scopophilia?
Scopophilia, which is the desire to watch and identify with what you're watching.
Is that when you said, it has to be film? I have to make movies?
It was like suddenly I had woken up from a drought and there was water in front of me, and I couldn't get enough.
Watch Hurt Locker and you do feel what the characters feel. As in the sniper scene, where the unit is pinned down all day long out in the desert. The audience feels the fear, the heat, and the thirst. Bigelow shot the movie almost entirely in Jordan, part of it in this Palestinian refugee camp, and used displaced Iraqis as characters and extras. With a measly $11 million budget, the actors and crew had to take their breaks in Bedouin tents. No air conditioning for anyone.
I think what was in our head was to survive any given day. I mean, you're in the Middle East, you're in the summer, you've got sandstorms, windstorms, probably an average of 115, 120 degree heat. Your lead actor's in a 100-pound bomb suit.
The cast had other challenges, since Bigelow often shot takes with 4 cameras rolling simultaneously, never telling the actors where the cameras were. Anthony Mackie plays Sergeant J.T. Sanborn.
I've never shot a movie like that before. So
you always knew where the camera was and had to worry about it.
What was my good side, where my light was coming from, how should I talk to you? That's how you make movies.
But this was different.
This
was almost like a documentary.
And it was guerrilla filmmaking.
Bigelow recently held a screening of the film for some real Bomb Squad veterans. They agree with her about the addiction of war, that the adrenaline rush in what they do creates a craving for more. Jim O'Neill, who heads a foundation that helps Bomb Squad techs, told about one tech who got wounded.
Lost a leg, got blown up, has lost a leg from the knee down. And he's over there in Afghanistan wearing the bomb suit with the prosthetic. That's the personality. I mean, it's an incredible.
Brad Somerville worked on a bomb squad in Baghdad.
After you've been there for a long period of time doing this over and over and going down range and you come home, there's an empty feeling inside.
They think Bigelow nailed it when she showed how difficult it was for Sergeant James to go home. He couldn't relate to his wife.
You know they need more bomb techs.
Want to chop those up for me?
And couldn't even function when he went to the grocery store to buy a box of cereal.
The image in the one that I took away the most was at the very end, was him walking through the grocery store. And that was the one that got me, wow, it's not happening anymore, and I'm back here, and it's not real, and it's all back there. And I can remember seeing him walking down the aisles and his mind going, what do I do now?
Can we play the clip of when Jeremy talks to his son?
But the older you get, the fewer things you really love. By the time you get to my age, maybe it's only 1 or 2 things. With me, I think it's 1.
Bigelow ends her movie with Sergeant James leaving his son, and going back to the war. It was crushing to think he needed that rush, that adrenaline fix so badly he couldn't stay home and take care of his son.
You know, that comes at a terrible, terrible price for him, and he knows it, but is incapable of doing anything different.
Frankly, I thought Kathryn was going to get this, so I'm kind of winging it here, and she richly deserves it.
Cameron won at the Golden Globes for Avatar, the only big award Bigelow hasn't won so far. And next week is the biggest one, the Oscars. If she does win and beats you out.
You mean when she wins as director?
You think she's going to win?
I think it's an irresistible story to finally be able to award the very first directing Oscar to a woman. And Kathryn, I'm sure she'll be very ambivalent about this because she'll be of a mind that, wait a minute, I want to win for the work. I don't want to win because I'm a woman. But I think it's irresistible at the moment of voting, that story.
Kathryn Bigelow will not like hearing that. She hates being considered a female director.
There's really no difference between what I do and what, a male filmmaker might do. I mean, we all try to make our days. We all try to get the best performances we can. We try to make our budget. We try to make the best movie we possibly can. So in that sense, it's very similar. On the other hand, I think the journey for women, no matter what venue it is, politics, business, film, it's a long journey.
Kathryn Bigelow gives a lot of credit to the screenwriter, Mark Bowl, a journalist who wrote the script after embedding with a bomb squad in Iraq. He has also been nominated for an Oscar.
With such an acrimonious election, we turn tonight to a man who tells the story of America in all her divisions and struggle for unity. Ken Burns' documentaries range from the Civil War to baseball, Vietnam, and last year's country music. Burns calls himself an emotional archaeologist. He excavates lost love letters, forgotten photos, and overlooked heroes. Research so deep, viewers can feel like strangers discovering America for the first time. His films ask what it means to be American. So we asked, what does it mean to be Ken Burns?
I have had the privilege of spending my entire life making films about the U.S., capital U, capital S. But I've also had the privilege of making films about us, the two-letter, lowercase plural pronoun that has a kind of intimacy and warmth to it.
In the country music film, Merle Haggard says, "Country music is about those things we believe in but can't see, like dreams and songs and souls."
It's telling us that there is in front of us a kind of rational world in which 1 and 1 always equals 2, but that the thing that compels us forward as human beings is that we look for 1 and 1 equaling 3. We find that in our faith, we find that in our art, we find that in our love of each other. And I think one of the things I discovered working on country music is that when I understood this dynamic between the US and us, lowercase, uppercase, that I realized there's only us, no them. The choice was easy because
Us, the American struggle to forge union from diversity, has been Ken Burns' obsession since he was 11 years old at the end of this lane in Ann Arbor, Michigan. In 1965, his mother was dying of cancer. At the same time, the fight for equality was in critical condition.
Before my mom died, I would watch and I would hear from the other room about the dogs and the fire hoses in Selma. And it would make me as upset in my gut as the worry about my mom. And it was almost as if I was transposing the cancer that was killing my family and the cancer that was killing my country. And if you look at my films, almost 40 of them, you can count on the fingers of one hand the number of films that don't end up dealing with race.
His early films included the Statue of Liberty and the Congress, but it wasn't until his 7th that America returned Ken Burns' affection. The Civil War was seen by 39 million viewers, an 11-hour epic that immortalized a love letter and a waltz.
The Ashokan Farewell.
The fiddle tune.
The fiddle tune.
That you can never get out of your head years later.
The lament seemed written as a score for the letter Union soldier Sullivan Ballou wrote his wife a week before his death.
I shall always be with you in the brightest day and the darkest night. Always. Always. And when the soft breeze fans your cheek, it shall be my breath, or the cool air, your throbbing temple. It shall be my spirit passing by.
I think every man wishes he could say those words to the woman he loves, and every woman wishes that her man could say that.
That may be our shot.
Burns' films are a letter to the country he loves, but not out of blind devotion. His is the affection that endures after confronting America's founding flaw.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Yet he owned more than 200 human beings and never saw fit to free them.
Burns finds the American paradox in the wars we fight and the games we play.
I told people that baseball was the sequel to the Civil War, and I meant it. I meant it. How we play games and the nature of immigration and the exclusion of women and popular culture and advertising and heroes and villains in our imagination and race and race and race are who we are. And the first real progress in civil rights after the Civil War takes place when Jack Roosevelt Robinson, the grandson of a slave, makes his way to first base at Ebbets Field on April 15th, 1947, then there's no question that the story of baseball is just going to take off from the assassination of Abraham Lincoln and the failure of Reconstruction and move to that moment.
Ken Burns' moment came in 1981 with his first subject, the Brooklyn Bridge, which no one thought was a good idea.
Well, you had an inanimate object and no one to interview.
Right.
Great television.
Yes. And I looked 12 years old, so I was out trying to raise money, and they'd say, "This child is trying to sell me the Brooklyn Bridge." No.
PBS bought the Brooklyn Bridge, and Burns structured his style, animating images frozen in time and giving them voice.
Here I was, 32 years old, suddenly in charge of the most stupendous engineering structure of the age.
Famous voices volunteer just to be in a Ken Burns film. Meryl Streep as Eleanor Roosevelt.
Courage is more exhilarating than fear.
Tom Hanks in The War.
You'd never realize now that he was one of those emaciated, tortured souls who survived by some miracle the horror of that death march at Bataan.
His films have the pace of patient revelation and time to think.
This is a beautiful part of the country.
It's the rhythm of a director who lives not in New York or LA, but on 50 acres of Walpole, New Hampshire, where even his apples have history.
So these are cuttings that were taken from trees at Monticello.
Of course they are. We met Burns before the pandemic. At 67, he has 4 daughters from 2 marriages, but his longest relationship, 4 decades, is with PBS.
I'm fortunate that PBS exists. I can go tomorrow to a premium channel or some place, streaming service, and get $30 million to do Vietnam, but no one's going to say, you can take 10.5 years, Ken. This was the main bedroom.
He can take his time because he raises the money and runs his own company, Florentine Films. Producers, writers, historians, editors, and photographers craft a half-dozen films at once, so Burns can release about 1 a year, even though a series like Country Music takes 8 years to finish.
Country music, the songwriter Harlan Howard said,
his 3 chords, and the truth.
These are great. You listened to 15,000 songs, sifted through more than 100,000 still photos, and did 101 on-camera interviews. Why so much?
One would think that making a film is an additive process. You're building this. It's not. It's subtractive. The best metaphor I know of is we make maple syrup here in this town, and it takes 40 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of maple syrup, and that's what the process is.
Burns has boiled down the history of Mark Twain, the national parks, plus 18 hours on Vietnam and 19 hours of jazz.
Ken's films touch something at the heart of our mythology and who we have been at our best and at our worst and who we want to be.
Composer Wynton Marsalis collaborated on jazz and country music. Marsalis is artistic director of New York's Jazz at Lincoln Center and something of an expert on improvising with Ken Burns.
He'll be vibrating, and that'll be in the 4th year of something. And it'll be 1 o'clock in the morning after you've worked since 9 o'clock in the morning. So now it's 1 o'clock. So he's still like, no, right here, we need to. And to see like a person with that type of energy and just on fire like that. And as he's grown older, it's gotten worse. So, you know,
the fire's gotten bigger.
The fire is, and just the enthusiasm, fire, the passion.
Ken told us that you see him. So what do you see?
You know, for me, I always see like a kid. If you can retain that childish awe and wonderment and belief that you can change things, if you can maintain that, and that's what I see in him.
And we found this little tiny place.
Childish awe and wonderment that somehow survived his childhood.
Would you say you had a happy childhood?
I don't think I had a childhood. I mean, I did, and I had happy moments. But my mother got cancer very early on, and that was the shadow cast across my brother and my childhood. We also had a father who was not mentally healthy. He was a functioning person, but he was an unhappy man.
Depression?
Depression, maybe bipolar, never accurately diagnosed.
Burns was 39 when he realized he was trapped behind the wall he built to shield himself from his mother's death. The revelation came from his father-in-law.
And he said, I bet you blew out your candles as a child, as a boy, wishing she'd come back. And I said, yeah, how you know? And he goes, look what you do for a living. You wake the dead. You make Abraham Lincoln and Jackie Robinson come alive. Who do you think you really want to wake up? So I called my brother, and we wept, and we said, we have to find Mommy.
They had to find her because she'd been buried in an unmarked pauper's grave with 28 souls, simply because Burns' father never retrieved her ashes from the funeral home.
It's a long and complicated story.
Like researching a story, Ken and his filmmaker brother Rick tracked their history to the mass grave, where they placed a memorial to Lila Burns.
The ability to say to the world, this is us, wouldn't have been possible without the crucible of her sickness, her death, and even that long wilderness of not dealing with it. And dealing with it, I think, has made me a better filmmaker.
A filmmaker working through the chapters of a single subject because Burns found, as Walt Whitman wrote, these states are the amplest poem.
I am working on 7 films right now. I mean, we got Ernest Hemingway, we have Muhammad Ali, we have Benjamin Franklin, we have LBJ, biographies. We're doing a history of the American Revolution and a biography of the Buffalo.
They are together the story of a people straining for union, a theme Ken Burns has explored from his very first film, which was, after all, about a bridge connecting America to America.
This is what stories do. They do liberate us from the tyrannies of our limitations and our past and our foibles. And so this is what we human beings do to negotiate this all too short passage that we call life. And I am so grateful that I live in the United States of America. I mean that. I mean that. And that I get to tell stories about us, the U.S.
What filmmaker has had 5 movies open #1 at the box office in the last 4 years? Spielberg? Tarantino? Scorsese? No. This record belongs to Tyler Perry, one of the biggest names in the movie business, yet most Americans have never heard of him. His 8 films have grossed more than $418 million, one of the highest average grosses for film in the industry, and they're just part of Perry's multi-million-dollar entertainment empire. What's made Tyler Perry guarantee box office gold is his devoted audience, largely African-American, church-going, working class, and female. Long ignored by Hollywood, they come to see something they can't get anywhere else, inspirational stories about people like themselves, and to laugh at characters like this.
Go in that room and take your medicine. You know you crazy as hell when you don't take it.
The gun-toting, wisecracking grandmother, played by Tyler Perry himself, Medea.
My soul cries out hallelujah. Thank God for saving me.
Medea is a cross between my mother and my aunt. She's the type of grandmother that was on every corner when I was growing up. She smoked, she walked out of the house with her curlers and a muumuu, and she watched everybody's kids. She didn't take no crap. She's a strong figure in where I come from, in my part of the African-American community. And I say that because I'm sure that there are some other parts of the African-American community that may be looking at me now going, who does he think he's speaking of? But for me, this woman was very, very, very visible.
That's what Tyler Perry's work is all about, reflecting a world his audience relates to, and they show up in droves.
You heard of the horse whisperer? I'm the kid whisperer.
It's been written that Medea is one of the top 10 grossing women actresses in the country.
They weren't serious when they wrote that. Come on, come on.
But Medea's done well. She's done well by you.
Yeah, she has, she has.
So have his other popular characters, like the flamboyant Mr. Brown.
I'm Leroy Brown. My friends call me Leroy Brown. You can just call me Leroy Brown? Yeah, how you know?
But it's not just comedy. Perry's work is a gumbo of melodrama, social commentary, and inspiration.
You got the strength God gave us women to survive. You just ain't tapped into it yet.
It's a formula, one that intentionally targets women.
You're always going to see a person of faith. 9 times out of 10 it'll be a woman who has problems, who has lost faith or lost her way. There's always going to be a moment of redemption somewhere for someone.
And then there are the grittier, darker elements, the violence, especially directed at women and children, sex and child abuse, prostitution and drug use. But there's always a fairy tale ending, a happy marriage, a reconciliation, often delivered with a dose of gospel music. Although Perry's themes are universal, he's not widely known outside of his niche audience.
The average American has no idea who you are. Now, how is it possible?
I'll tell you how it's possible. It's there's this great thing called the Chitlin Circuit, which I started my shows on. And back in the day when, Ray Charles and Billie Holiday and Duke Ellington, they couldn't get into white establishments, so they went on this circuit and toured. They were huge stars in their own community, and that's pretty much my same story. I was able to build and have this amazing career among my own people, but outside of that, not a lot of people knew who I was.
Tyler Perry, superstar of the Chitlin Circuit.
That's yeah, superstar of the Chitlin Circuit. I'll take that.
You realize what a superstar he is and how strongly the audience connects to him when he appears on stage after a performance of one of his plays. Their reaction gives you a sense of how passionate they are about it.
You make me nervous. Sit down.
But he didn't always get this kind of reaction. He got his start in theater, writing, directing, and producing plays. His first production, a gospel musical staged in Atlanta in 1992, bombed. But he kept writing and staging new plays, cultivating his audience. By the late 90s, they were selling out across the country, making big money, more than $75 million. Perry's goal? Turn those shows into movies. Hollywood's reaction? Get lost.
They didn't open the door. You had to cut a hole in the window to get in.
That's what you did?
Oh yeah, man. If you close the door on me and tell me I can't, I'm gonna find a way to get in. Yeah.
He found his way in by setting up shop in Atlanta in 2004, where he made his first film, Diary of a Mad Black Woman, using his own money.
He who has the goal makes the rules. If somebody else is gonna give you the money, then they're gonna be in control. They're gonna own it, they're gonna tell you how it goes, they're gonna give you notes and give you changes. I wasn't willing to do that, so there was no other option for me.
Diary debuted at #1 in 2005, stunning Hollywood. Perry's been surprising Hollywood ever since, doing it his way. He writes, directs, and produces his movies, and all 8 of them have been major hits, including his latest, I Can Do Bad All By Myself, which opened #1 at the box office in September.
This is your dream?
Yeah. One of them.
This is Tyler Perry Studios, 31 acres of movie and television production facilities, one of the largest independently owned studios outside of Hollywood. It opened last October, financed by Perry himself, with the profits he's made from his productions. It's Perry's multi-million-dollar Magic Kingdom.
This is the back lot, and I named it 34th Street as in Miracle on 34th Street.
He makes all of his films here, releasing 2 a year, and he employs as many as 400 people.
That's the Cicely Tyson stage next to it.
It has 5 sound stages, a gym, even a chapel.
This is wardrobe, and there's Medea.
Where?
Up there. That's all Medea. That's where she lives between movies.
Roll sound, please. We're rolling.
When he's not making movies, this relentless multitasker is running his 2 hit sitcoms on TBS, House of Pain and Meet the Browns.
Hit him hard, really.
He has total creative control and owns everything he makes.
There we cut, very good. Thanks a lot, I'm out of here.
Tyler Perry's huge success has brought him power and even comparisons to Oprah, his friend and mentor. They've teamed up to executive produce Precious, a film about an urban teenage mother battling abuse and illiteracy, which opens in November.
Do not play him small, because he is not just some lucky, rich Negro turned black man. He is not. To be able to take what he saw as an opportunity to reach a group of people and to turn that into this multi-million, soon to be multi-billion-dollar enterprise is what everybody else is trying to do.
What's the connection you think Tyler Perry has with African-American women?
Well, first of all, I think he grew up being raised by strong black women, and so much of what he does is really in celebration of that. I think that's what Medea really is, a compilation of, all those strong black women that I know, and maybe you do too. And so the reason it works is because people see themselves.
This is it, this is my universe.
Perry says he's writing what he knows, writing where he comes from. He grew up working class in this tough New Orleans neighborhood.
And my heart is racing just being here. Isn't that crazy?
Why?
I don't have good memories here at all.
But it's those memories, both good and bad, that have inspired much of his work.
Mr. James is still sitting on the porch. He's watching everything. You know that boy was over there with that girl last night. So.
That sounds like one of your characters.
Yeah, man, listen, are you kidding me?
We met 2 neighbors who reminded us an awful lot of a certain grandmother.
These are the kind of women I grew up with.
Oh, yes, and Christian women,
Christian women with guns.
I mean, Christian women.
And then people wonder where Medea came from.
We crossed the street to where he used to live, and the pain of his past came back.
This is where I grew up, and I have not been in this house in years.
In this house, Perry says his father Emmett repeatedly beat him and his mother Maxine. He described one time when his father whipped him with a cord until the skin came off his back, and told us when his father wasn't beating him, he was belittling him.
Your father used to warn your mother about you.
Yeah, one day I would make her cry, because she would try to protect me from him. What the you protecting him for? What are you protecting him for? This boy ain't gonna be one day gonna make you cry.
He brought us out back, showed us the cubbyhole where he would escape from his father's abuse.
This was my hideout, my safe place, you know?
When it got too much, you go in here?
Yeah, I've spent like all day in there. So I had a door there so I can go in and close myself up, you know, to be okay for a minute. Yeah.
Your father, it sounds like, can still make you feel like that boy, little boy. Now, how is it possible?
You'd have to walk that road and be that little boy. A lot of it I've put out of my mind because it was so horrific and so painful that had I not, and that's where my imagination was born, and he was losing it and saying all those things, I could absolutely be there in that room with him at the top of his lungs and go somewhere else in my head.
His faith and his mother, he says, saved him.
Sunday morning, she'd take me to church. And this is the only time I saw her smiling happy. So I wanted to know the God, this Christ that made my mother smile so much.
Perry says he's forgiven his father and come to terms with the abuse.
This is what happens. You let it destroy you, or you take it and you use it. I chose to use it, and I chose to put it in my work, and I choose to have it touch and make people understand it.
Yet there are some who don't understand Perry's work and dismiss it, many of them African Americans. They find characters like Medea and Mr. Brown demeaning caricatures, racial stereotypes.
Spike Lee has said, and I quote, "I think there's a lot of stuff out today that is coonery and buffoonery. I see ads for Meet the Browns and House of Pain, and I'm scratching my head. We got a black president, and we're going back. The image is troubling, and it harkens back to Amos and Andy."
Right.
He's talking about you.
I would love to read that to my fan base. Let me tell you what Medea, Brown, all these characters are bait. Disarming, charming, make you laugh bait. So I can slap Medea in something and talk about God, love, faith, forgiveness, family, any of those things, you know? Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's that thing, you know, that pisses me off. It really does, because it's so insulting. It's attitudes like that make Hollywood think that these people do not exist, and that's why there's no material speaking to them, speaking to us.